So trust is built on understanding that with the open communication, they can work through whatever problems they have and be willing to ask for help from an outside source if needed. So there's no shame in saying, I don't know, but I can help you find out.
Welcome to Innovating Education. I'm Dr. Riley Williams, and in each episode, we explore bold ideas and breakthrough strategies shaping the future of teaching and learning. Today, we're diving into a critical issue: retaining special education teachers. Joining us is a leading expert in the field, Dr. Natasha Veale. Dr. Veale brings 25 years of experience in the field of special education. Currently, she is serving as the Dean of the School of Social Sciences and Education at Greensboro College and has a consulting firm specializing in leadership development. She's now the author of an amazing book, How to Retain Special Education Teachers, a transformational leadership guide for school administrators. Dr. Veale, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Riley. Thank you for having me.
Well, Dr. Veale, before we dive in, I'd love to hear about your journey. What first sparked your passion for education, and what led you to ultimately write this book?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate you inviting me here to share today. Where do I start? So, my passion for education was sparked all the way back in kindergarten. I knew I wanted to be a teacher after an experience with my kindergarten teacher. She recognized that I was already able to read books. So, she would put me on her lap and sitting on the rocking chair while the rest of the class were sitting crisscross applesauce on the carpet, and they would listen to me read. I fell in love with reading, and I wanted to be a teacher from the first time she allowed me to read them. My love for people with disabilities stemmed from a cousin who had cerebral palsy and hydrocephaly when we were kids. And at a young age, I always sought out people who were different and felt the need to protect them. And then by the time I got to high school, I would sneak off over into the separate self-contained classrooms where students with disabilities were just to hang out. And I also took a sign language class in my junior year that sparked my specific interest in teaching students with disabilities. And that led me to earn a degree in education of the deaf and hard of hearing. But after college, my first teaching job was in a self-contained separate classroom in a high school, ironically, with students who had severe learning disabilities, but no one had a hearing impairment that I went to school for. So needless to say, it was very difficult learning how to teach disability areas I was not familiar with. I had to return to school to earn a teaching license in the area I was teaching in as an adult, and I'd already started a family. So there's so much to tell about that, but to cut it short, I ended up earning a second bachelor's degree and teaching license in special education. Because of all of my struggles and how I had to manage teaching situations, sometimes with very little support, I decided that I wanted to help other teachers. And so I earned a master's degree in special education and started adjuncting an alternative licensure program that prepared adult learners to become special ed teachers. So it's kind of like full circle. Adults who had decided to go back to school who had similar situations that I started out in, right? And so I continued on to earn a PhD in special education leadership while adjuncting and still teaching as a special ed teacher because my ultimate goal was to become a full-time college professor to train and support pre-service and in-service special ed teachers. After teaching higher ed for about 13 years, dun dun dun, the pandemic hit, right? And so I spent all of that time teaching and supporting special ed teachers, but the biggest issue revealed itself during that time for the students in my program, at least. They started expressing feeling neglected and without support from their school administrators, even more than usual throughout the years of the, consoling that I had to provide throughout those years. So my thought was, what could I do about this? And so my solution to anything is to educate myself, right? So I decided to return to school to earn an EDD in organizational change and administration because I wanted to learn about the administrative point of view because I had never been a principal. I'd always been a special ed teacher. And so I wrote my dissertation on principles, barriers, and challenges and needs regarding their transformational leadership when leading their special ed teachers. I wanted to know their point of view about what prevented them from being able to support their special ed teachers and what do they need to be able to best retain them. And so I started presenting my research everywhere, every conference that I could find. And at one of those conferences, a book publisher overheard me by chance. And so the rest is history. I never actually planned to write a book, but the information from the study needed to be extended in a practical way. So I locked myself away to create this how to guide to help school administrators retain their special education teachers. So students with disabilities can get the services that they deserve in an environment where everyone cares about their outcomes and the teachers who make it happen.
That is amazing. I'm actually wearing my ASL t shirt today. It says
I
be
see.
kind in ASL. So I
Awesome.
really love that. Now, your book focuses on transformational leadership as a key strategy. Could you define what that means in the context of special education and why it's essential for retaining teachers?
Absolutely. So, transformational leadership in my research can be defined as a process that changes and transforms people for the better, where the leader interacts with the followers to create positive change. In the context of special education, I'm trying to enforce the link between how building level administrators interact with their special education teachers through the transformational leadership behaviors, which are inspirational motivation, idealized influence, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration to lead to positive change in their relationships and the school environment that could increase the chances of special education teacher retention. So, transformational leadership is important in retaining teachers because it is already proven to be effective in countless general education studies as its use increases job satisfaction and organizational commitment and improves school morale for general education teachers. So why can't this be the case for special education teachers was my thought. So it was very difficult for me to find studies that connected transformational leadership with special education retention, but I did find a few that I do expand in the book to support why making a connection is very necessary.
So, what are some of the key characteristics of transformational leaders in special education?
Well, in the context of education, a transformational leader is one who is highly visible around the school, builds a rapport with teachers, interacts with them daily, builds relationships, uses open communication, establishes a vision that includes everyone, enforces high expectations, listens, is approachable, reflective of themselves, uses self reflection, and has an open mind. And there are so many more, but the characteristics align with one who is able to be a positive influence, individually consider, motivate, and inspire their teachers.
So, what are some small daily leadership habits that administrators can adopt to foster this type of environment?
I say they'll need to become effective listeners as they interact with the teachers on a daily basis. John Maxwell says a person doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I say administrators can try to give individual attention to teachers' needs in a way that shows them they care about their well being. I also think administrators can reflect daily on the ups and the downs of their day, especially when involving special ed teachers, to think about how they can improve those situations, somehow help the next day be just a little bit better than the day before. Reflection is key.
Now, research shows that administrative support is one of the biggest factors that is influencing teacher retention. What are some practical, time effective ways administrators can create a more supportive environment for our special education teachers?
So, the transformational leadership behavior that focuses on creating a supportive environment is individual consideration. A practical way to consider a special education teacher is to ask them directly what they need. How can I help you? Talk to them and stop to listen with intention. Share what they share in your conversations with stakeholders who can help get what they need and include them in school based conversations. I just think a little consideration goes a long way.
That's so true. So simple, but so true. And sometimes we just miss the mark, right?
Right. Yeah. We're so busy in our day to day.
So, how can school leaders involve our general education teachers in creating a more supportive culture for our special education educators?
That is a great question. I do want to acknowledge that most general education teachers do not have or may not have an extensive training in working with students with disabilities in their, prior teacher prep programs, and neither do school administrators. So that is not always an easy task or easy ask or task at that. So I said before, a school leader sets the tone. So it's necessary that expectations are established at the beginning of a school year so the administrator can ensure the master schedule allows for common planning so the general and special ed teachers can collaborate as much as possible. They can also have individual conversations with the general education teachers to find out their levels of understanding and comfort level when working with students with disabilities to help ease the anxieties they might have. And admin could also encourage voluntary teams, not so much involuntary, but voluntary teams, and offer support in their efforts to work together. It is important to have those hard conversations to try to foster some understanding and find some common ground between the general and the special education teachers. And mind you, that common ground is the student, right? To hopefully help the general education teacher be more open to contributing to that supportive environment.
That's excellent advice. So, through your research and your consulting work, what are some common mistakes that administrators make when trying to support special education teachers?
Oh, okay. So this question is answered throughout part two of my book, where I give accounts of principals' challenges when leading special education teachers. So some of the mistakes I found, they'd say, were times when they wish they had included the students with disabilities and special education teachers in the master schedule for the school when they created it, but they didn't think about it up front. It was more of an afterthought. Then it became a hassle trying to fix all the problems that occurred after the fact. Another mistake was forgetting to go back and check on the special ed teacher after they expressed a concern. So it gives off the perception that the administrator just didn't care. Without proper communication, assumptions are made, and the teacher ends up feeling even more undervalued and unsupported. Another mistake is about just not being up to date with what's going on in special education. One of the principals said when he was unsure about something special education related, he would refer to a textbook from his principal prep program, but it was written in 2007. So the special education field changes so much, and so it's important to stay current in order to be able to properly offer support. So I'd say these are just a snippet of a few of the mistakes that occur daily without really realizing it. So it's more of an after the fact thought.
So, on the flip side, can you share examples of schools or districts that are getting it right? What best practices have you seen that lead to long term teacher retention?
Well, while I can't share exact names and specific of schools or districts, I know great work is being done. It is refreshing to know that there are school administrators out there who value employing transformational leadership practices to retain their special ed teachers. But keep in mind that using the term transformational leadership alongside special education leadership for school administrators is a new concept. So long-term teacher retention is a goal with an increase in its use of combining the two. So that is the reason why I wanted to focus on writing a guide on how to put those two areas together. And so some of the principals that I talk to understand and are committed to including their special ed teachers in school improvement planning and professional learning communities at their schools. They want to see their teachers become teacher leaders, by encouraging them to lead professional development sessions so that general ed teachers and everyone else can gain a better picture of what these special ed teachers do. One principal talked about how he gained his special ed teacher's trust by talking to her about her struggles and bringing in a district level special ed person who could directly address her needs. He showed her that he was her advocate and also made sure she had the classroom resources she needed to overcome the particular issue. As I remember, he actually said, I treated her like a professional.
Wow. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head. So, for our current school administrators who may be struggling with high turnover in special education, what's one immediate step that they can take to start improving retention today?
Today, educate themselves. Don't rely on others to do it. Take the initiative to seek out resources that will help them understand the underlying problems. That is what the book aims to do. Once they figure out and acknowledge the shortcomings, they can develop a plan to figure out how to create the change they seek, but they have to seek it first.
I mean, that makes sense. Definitely. And I'm just going to put a plug in here. They have to get your book. It is fantastic.
Thank you.
So, how can administrators assess their current retention challenges to know where to start?
I'm in North Carolina. I live in North Carolina, and we have a teacher working conditions survey that's distributed statewide. That is good for finding out overall retention challenges in individual schools. I'm not sure if other states have this particular tool, but it's worth looking into for listeners to look into their state to find out if that's the case. But if administrators want to specifically focus on assessing their current retention challenges, focusing on transformational leadership, and special education leadership that they and their special ed teachers can take, I created an assessment based on my research that digs a bit deeper than the general retention surveys. I welcome anyone to reach out to me to, access it. And if I conduct the assessment with admin and staff, I also create a comprehensive report based on those results. And then we can collaborate to establish a plan to improve the retention challenges that the assessment revealed.
So, what would you say is a small leadership habit that, if done consistently, can make a big difference in teacher morale?
I think a small yet powerful habit can be given emotional support. When times are hard and teachers are struggling with their day to day demands, a kind, encouraging word can go a long way. No one likes to feel alone or isolated, but special education teachers often do. And that's deep in the research. They often do feel isolated. If administrators make a point to check on their teachers often, that will make a big difference. They can, to themselves, schedule weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly check-ins just to remind their teachers of the value at their schools.
And we've already alluded to this a little bit, but how can administrators involve their teachers in the process of improving retention efforts?
Wonderful. They can model and encourage two-way communication in their interactions. I think more often than not, teachers and administrators alike suffer in silence. They go about their day living in the struggle because they don't think anyone understands or no one can relate. And in some cases, that may very well be true, but the administrator can model being open about not fully understanding special education and can share that with their teacher one on one. They don't have to tell everybody, I know it's a faux pas, but they can commit to growing together. The admin can ask the teacher to share their concerns, and the administrator can be honest about their ability or inability to help in order to establish trust. So, trust is built on understanding that with the open communication, they can work through whatever problems they have and be willing to ask for help from an outside source if needed. So there's no shame in saying, I don't know, but I can help you find out.
I think we've all felt that way at some point, so that's
Mhm.
an excellent insight. So, for our aspiring administrators or our current special education teachers who may be considering leadership roles, what advice would you give them?
Well, just what I just said, there's no shame in saying, I don't know, but I can find out. Special education is a very complex field, and there's a lot that goes into it to make it run smoothly, but no one is expected to know everything. I think there's a silent stigma of the lack of knowledge that prevents administrators from talking about their lack of knowledge. So I say be open about what you don't know. Ask for guidance. Learn beside someone else who needs help to model that it's okay to ask. That is the human side of education that I think we don't focus on. It'll be easier to show compassion and empathize with someone else's issues when you admit that you have some yourself. A good leader says, I'm right here with you.
So, Dr. Veale, I have one final question for you. If you could leave our listeners with one thing, whether it's about leadership, special education, or anything else, what would it be?
That change is hard. Don't be afraid to do the hard things. Start small. I always tell my students in my teacher licensure program, how do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Your small changes can make a big difference in the lives of students with disabilities, special education teachers, and your school as a whole. So, transformational change in special education is possible, but it starts with you. It starts with the administrator who leads the school.
Dr. Veale, I can't tell you how much I love this conversation. It is incredibly important. And your book offers not only research based strategies, but also practical tools that administrators can apply immediately. So, where can our listeners find how to retain special education teachers, and how can they connect with you for leadership consulting or training?
Absolutely. So, right now, the book is available at most online bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, even Vital Source and eCampus for higher ed institutions because it can be used in principal prep programs. But it's best to purchase it directly from the publisher, Myers Education Press, that's Myers, at myersedpress.com, because listeners of this podcast can purchase the book with a 25% discount. And that code is MEP25. So capital M, capital E, capital P, 25. And if anyone in the education field, general or special, would like to connect with me to learn about my leadership consulting or coaching or workshops that I do, you can visit me at vealleadershipconsulting.com. And that's my last name, Veal like the meat, but with an E, vealleadershipconsulting.com, or info. You can email me at info@vealleadershipconsulting.com.
And just a reminder for our listeners, I am going to link all of that information in the comments section. Dr. Veale, thank you again for coming on the show. To our listeners, if you're an educator or school leader, this book is a must read. Retaining great teachers isn't just about reducing turnover, it's about creating an environment where educators can thrive. We're proud to be supported by the Solvia Learning Group, whose commitment to advancing education makes conversations like this possible. So, if today's episode sparked ideas or helped reframe your thinking, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a colleague. Until next time, keep innovating.